Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. I want to wish everyone an incredibly happy Pride Month. And I am beaming today for all the right reasons, because today, in this month of June, on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, we have our special Pride edition of our new book showcase. And as I am saying this, I haven't even said the poets' names yet. I am getting chills. I am just getting chills. I am just so excited for this reading. Today, in our new book showcase, you will be hearing from the amazing poets who have joined us here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry before, but they have never been together in this configuration. We'll be hearing from Karen Poppy, Mark Ward, Risa Denenberg, and David Groff. And as I said, I just could not be more thrilled to be welcoming them to our program today for our special Pride edition of our new books showcase. Well, before we get started and hearing the amazing poetry, I'm Sandy Yannone, your host for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I want to also always thank Kim Ports Parsons and Don Krieger for the support for the program. And I want to give a special shout out to our readers from last week that joined us for our June Poets Focus on rhyme and rhythm and rhyme. We had a rousing time, and it was just so great to have everybody on the open mic with us. A reminder, which I will also remind you at the end of the program today, we will be having our wild card Poetry Pride Parade. It's our 4th annual Poetry Pride Parade. Will be our last reading for the month of June. I'll tell you all who the features are, and you all will also have opportunity to be the features on the open mic. So if you're here today, you'll want to be here next week as well, and tell all your friends, because it's going to be quite an extravaganza. Well, today's new book showcase, as I said, is just spectacular. We have 4 poets that have been with us on Cultivating Voices in many different readings and reasons to participate. And I have such appreciation individually for each of these amazing human beings, as well as their spectacular work that I just really personally follow myself. I love these 4 poets, and I'm very excited to share their work today and to have them be in this unique constellation together. Well, let's get to it, shall we? And thanks everybody here live in Zoom, those of you watching on Facebook. And of course, I always like to give a little plug for those who watch us on the recordings. So welcome to one and all. Our first poet for today is none other than the absolutely wonderful, dashing, smashing, fabulous Karen Poppy. Folks, Karen has been with us on Cultivating Voices. I'll tell you a brief little story. Karen's first chapbook was Crack Open Emergency. And when Cultivating Voices was starting, I began to look for I was on the Finishing Line Press website, and I was reading about collections. And I got to Karen's and I was so struck by the title. You know, it had that element of disaster sound to it, which those of you who know me know I have a little penchant for that. And you know, I just saw the image for me, crack open emergency, just immediately grabbed me. And I believe I reached out to Karen, and I didn't know Karen at all, um, and invited Karen to read on Cultivating Voices live poetry with what then was Karen's first chapbook. It was a very memorable reading, to say the least. And every single time that Karen has been with us has been equally as memorable. And it is so, so wonderful to be able to have Karen back with us on the program today, where we get to celebrate with Karen her, you know, Karen's first full-length poetry collection. Karen Poppy, her non-binary, has work published in numerous literary journals, magazines, and anthologies. Diving at the Lip of the Water is Karen Poppy's first full-length poetry collection. Her chapbooks, Crack Open Emergency from 2020 and Our Own Beautiful Brutality from 2021, are published by Finishing Line Press. Her chapbook, Every Possible Thing, is published by Homestead Lighthouse Press, also in 2020. Karen is an attorney licensed in California and Texas and lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Welcome to you, Karen, and Kitty, wherever Kitty is today. And thank you so much for starting us off today in our special Pride edition for our new book showcase.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I just want to be able to reach through this screen and hug you. And I wish I was seeing you in person, but I'm excited to see Kim Ports Parsons and also Don Krieger in person this coming Friday, the 16th. And anyone who is in Charlottesville, Virginia area or wants to be on Friday at 7 p.m. I'm going to have an in-person reading at New Dominion, a bookstore right on the mall in Charlottesville, Virginia. Oh, Sandy, I so want you to be too. I want you to be there. And then on next Sunday, I will be in person with Kim Ports Parson at her house for the Cultivating Voices live reading. And one last, well, I have a couple more announcements that for Wednesday night poetry, I'm going to be one of the featured readers, and I already made the recording. I am sharing not only my poetry, but a special recipe. I made a recipe for a Department of Justice indictment sandwich. And yes, there are Cheetos involved. So tune in for that also. In addition, one more announcement, and it's tied in with the first things I'll read. I have some poems set to music by fabulous composer Myron Silberstein, and they have premiered, well, one of them has Prometheus's Monster, with the Grammy-nominated soprano Laura Dixon Strickling, and she's coming out with a CD titled 40 at 40. It's for her 40th birthday. She has recorded 40 songs, art songs, and the first 20, including mine, is the third song and on the CD. It's coming out, it's on pre-order, so I can put later on the code to get a discount on that and the website information to order. But I'm just super excited. So even though you've all joined to hear me read from, if I can show it, my weird screen, Diving at the Lip of the Water. I'm actually going to start by going back in time to when I had my chapbook come out, Every Possible Thing, because there are 4 poems in this that were set to music by Myron Silverstein and sung by Laura Dixon Strickling, the one that's recorded, and then 3 others. So I'll start with Every Possible Thing. What I promised, I gave you. Silver-skinned gloves, my hands, loosened from life, became twin fish. Gold-skin shoes, my tongue, loosened from speech, became birdsong. Dearest silk, you called my skin that. Now may it suit you after my death. All is possible. My love, my life, given to you to take away any doubt, any moment lonely. I embrace you intimately. Wear me like finery. Don't worry, Kitty is snoring away in the background. She is not as excited as I am, or I don't know. Maybe it was just too much for her and she just passed out. The next poem I'll read is Emily and Susie. It is about Emily Dickinson and her sister-in-law in love, Susie. So happy Pride Month, everybody. The life a love can have before it dies, a rich and lucky thing, cashmere combed and honey kissed, an orchard of happiness, that I'll wake there before I die, to spend a day among that fruit with you. Then I'll not see eternity as such a barren misery. The next poem I'm going to read is titled Virginia. It's about Virginia Woolf, but it's actually about my coming back to my creative self, which started in 2017 in Virginia, the state. So returning to Charlottesville to Virginia for the reading on the 16th, it's a return. And it's also, I can't say too much for a few years probably yet, but it's part of my poetic justice tour. There's a little bit of poetic justice in coming back. Virginia, I've survived everything, even myself drowning. I've emerged singing, wiping mud from brow, learning how to breathe within this expansion, having broken free from every prison, even that of my own lungs. In death, I am alive. Stones don't weigh me down. This river, a sea, an ocean, awash in spirited sound. Color, blue and green, water, swirl of ether. I exist here, polished, clean. The next poem is Prometheus's Monster, and it's the one that's on the 40 at 40 CD, and it premiered, I believe it was in Chicago. Prometheus's Monster. There's this cat called Prometheus who wants to skunk up my tree. Gave me fire, creativity, then backed away, afraid of it, of me, Prometheus, return to me. I am your useful monster, set aflame so prettily. And I love what the composer did with this song. He actually made it jazzy, and there's the sound of cat's feet running across the piano. He composed that, and I just love it. The last poem I'll read from Every Possible Thing, the chapbook Every Possible Thing, is What Comes After. And then I'll read some from Diving at the Lip of the Water. What comes after? All that's left, your name, no longer your name, but another. The greatness of each small power. Nothing more than it is, perhaps simply nothing. Given and not given. Don't be afraid of your own leaving. Don't be afraid that you won't remember. Someday, your true name will answer. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to read now from Diving at the Lip of the Water. This is my first full-length collection of poetry, and it's available for purchase on the Beltway Editions website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and small independent bookstores. Go for it. I love independent bookstores, and let's support them. This poem was first published in Lavender Review, and Mary Merriam made a beautiful edit to it. Thank you, Mary. Womb. Interior sister, liminal as in moving toward change, liminal as in close to imperceptible, close to as within you. Tender hive, she nested in you, grew thick-walled and large. In her next existence, she will emerge and soar. She will live as a bird carrying and dispersing seed. She will live as a field of flowers. Bees will dust their legs with her pollen, dance, remember her scent, bring her back to their hive, bring her home to herself. The next poem I'll read is Oysters on the Beach. Again, happy Pride, everyone. This is a love song, love poem. And oddly, it was written inspired by someone I consider a muse. And that isn't a romantic love with me in this muse. It's really a spiritual love. And yet, here's this very sensual poem that came out of our conversation. Salted raw and delicious, oysters on the beach, ocean air, the way I see you, the way I want to kiss you, bring you into harvest. Your hair whips in the wind, your knees draw up and you pose. There is so much you make me feel. Water swirls below, wilds itself on rocks. I step back as if you were a photograph, withdraw from you, your soft, open delicacy. I'll end the reading with the title poem, Diving at the Lip of the Water. It starts with a quote from Judy Grahn. I am the wall at the lip of the water. I am the rock that refused to be battered. I am the dike in the matter, the other. I am the wall with the womanly swagger. I am the dragon the dangerous dagger. I am the bulldyke, the bull dagger. And that's from Judy Grant's book, Another Mother Tongue, about the linguistic history of the word bulldyke. And it's spelled either Bulldyke or Bullldike. And then this is a quote from the website Fascinating Africa. The common diker, Duiker, a small antelope whose name is obviously pronounced diker, uses a pair of glands under its eyes for scent markings with a tarry secretion. Dikers run with a distinctive darting and diving style when they flee danger. This gives rise to its common name, which is the Afrikaans for diver. Between trees, within edges of forests, woodlands, among open clearings, with scent markings below eyes, we label another our own. This is how we bulldikers do it. We males secrete a substance, deftly labeling, marking with our tarry, leaf-scented names, our territories, calves, mates. When we run, we dive at the lip of the water, be it a field, a deep forest, a body. We do this from love or fear, which you understand, for you and I mark in the same way. Humans cover with other scents, afraid of labels or diving into them. Each marking, energy, power. Labels we give ourselves, labels we use to mark an other. Some names change in meaning, mutate over time, original markers lost. Some we mistake in origin. Bulldyker, a male antelope, never the origin of bulldyke. We cull meaning from sound, just as our eyes tell us what we see. We feel an energy, a power. You misread her by mistake or by design. We can only guess at the origin of bulldyke and bulldagger. Roman times, Harlem Renaissance, novels, women singing the blues. Dig within erasure and resistance. I like the blues best. The song written and sung by Bessie Jackson, pseudonym of Lucille Bogan. Explicit and raw, prophetic, dirty blues. Peel back the layers and here it is, the lay of the land. Women can be whatever they choose. Come in a time, BD, women ain't gonna need no men. This is a quote from Judy Grant. Bulldyke is the kind of word most women hope to avoid all their lives, for few things are more horrifying to be called, end quote. But these women hold the dagger. Surrounded by hostile bulls, sometimes surrounded by women afraid of difference, sometimes by people who insist she must be a man. We can reclaim the name used on a woman like a whip. We can reclaim our own swagger. Our swagger can be womanly. Our swagger can mark our love. So says my lover who loves me body and soul. There must be space for everyone, for women who swagger, for all women. Don't say she isn't lesbian because she loves me. There must be space for her, for me, queer, never quite within borders, between, on edges, in the open. I want to make that clear. Embrace and don't isolate us. Surround us with love, define us, mark us by our love for each other. I love a woman, but my gender bleeds beyond labels and markings, no matter what I'm called and what you call me. No matter what I call myself, I am marked. I bleed monthly. I've been attacked with thrown stones, called a dyke. I swagger womanly and I love a woman, but I am not one. I swagger and I shift. We have to love each other, those on either side of gender binary, those who transform, transgress, and those who stay hidden in heavy cover. Also, those like me who don't fit evenly, who shift and move without gender and within sexuality. Some things, especially hate, can mark you. They have marked me. Call me what you will. I love you as I do, unconditionally. I will love my lover, knowing her beauty shakes the earth, comes from another place, full of energy, power. The sleek diker dives in escaping run, zigzags like my lover's tongue. But my lover is not afraid. My body a safe field, a sheltering forest. She cleanses me, recitations of sacred ash, this beautiful burning, a pooled release. When I cry, I am hers, and I am her. She holds me. There lived a warrior queen named Boudica, Bulldike, or Bulldiker. In a last stand with warrior daughters, Boudica burned Londinium, now modern London, to the ground. She led a vast uprising when Romans invaded to destroy her people. What happens if we erase her name? What happens to our own markings of energy, power? Let her be named. Let us dive at the lip of the water into love and fearless. Let us mark each other with freedom like bold Boldika at the helm of the chariot, horses charging, no one holding the reins. Thank you. Happy Pride, everyone. Be yourself and all will be well. You're loved.
Whew. That is Karen Poffey, everyone. And I began the reading today with chills, and I have chills at the end of your reading. What I want to say briefly, Karen, well, obviously, thank you. And that title poem, Diving at the Lip of the Water, an anthem, an anthem. That is a tour de force. From the life force of your life, the totality of it. And that poem for me is the epitome of why we get together, why Pride events are so important. And I thank you so much for bringing also the names of so many of those poets like Judy Grahn and Virginia Woolf, and invoking those that also helped create this legacy today. A really, every reading of my that you've done is memorable to me. Congratulations for just taking it right through the roof today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Oh my gosh. You are so
Incredible.
kind. Thank you.
It's just the truth, my friend. It's just the truth. Well, everyone, fasten your seatbelts, do whatever you need to do, because we're just getting started. We go to the 90-minute mark with all our readings, a little bit here or there. The new book showcases usually come in a little less than that. So there's some amazing poetry up and coming to follow what you just heard. Now, I have to say myself, I wouldn't want to follow for that reading. But a person who is certainly up to the task, because I have heard this person read before, is none other than Mark Ward. And of course, everybody, I always tell you when one of the folks is one of my siblings, one of my beautiful Salmon siblings, my Salmon brother, Mark Ward, who has also graced us with such a variety of performances here on Cultivating Voices live poetry. I love the range and diversity of Mark's work. I love how Mark's mind works, and I love how it is evoked in his poetry. So I am so grateful to have Mark here today and to be able to celebrate with Mark. Mark's new collection, also his first full poetry collection, Nightlight, which is from Salmon Poetry. And I was lamenting the fact that many of you know I'm getting ready to take a fairly epic journey from west to east later this summer. And many of my most of my books are all packed away, and I could not get Nightlight out of its box, and I couldn't even get Crack Open. I thought I was going to find Crack Open Emergency. I knew I wasn't going to find Diving. I knew I wasn't going to find Diving at the Lip of the Water, because I just knew I didn't know what box it was in, but I thought I knew where Crack Open Emergency was. And I thought I knew where. I looked for Nightlight this morning, and one desperate last attempt, and I couldn't find it. So my apologies, but you all get to hear from it today. Well, Mark Ward is a published poet from and living in Dublin, who has been writing poetry since childhood. His work has been published in a variety of literary journals and anthologies across the world, including Tincture, Soft Blow, Asarchus, and in Ireland, the Irish Times, Poetry Ireland Review, and Skylight 47, among many others. He is the author of 3 chapbooks. We've been blessed to hear from them here on Cultivating Voices live poetry. Circumference from Finishing Line Press, 2018. Carcass from 7 Kitchens Press, 2020. And a prose haiku hybrid novella thing. That's what Mark says, a novella thing. Hike from Bear Creek Printing Press, 2021. As I mentioned before, Mark's first full-length poetry collection, Nightlight, is out from Salmon Poetry. Additionally, Mark is the editor of Impossible Archetype, which is an international LGBTQ plus journal of exquisite design and exquisite curation and exquisite poetry. And if you've not had an opportunity to dive into all the possibilities that reside in Impossible Archetype, oh, do you have an amazing experience in front of you. So Mark is the editor the founder and editor of Impossible Archetype, a playwright, a cabaret performer, and of course, so much more. Would you please welcome the so much more, Mark Ward.
Thank you so much, Sandy. You're always the most wonderfully gracious and just emotive and wonderful host. And thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to do any events by you, and I'm delighted to be back at Cultivating Voices with Nightlight. And I'm super, as I was saying to you earlier, I'm super excited for Sandy's second collection next year, also out from Salmon. So keep an eye out for that. I'm mostly going to read from Nightlight, which was out in February. So I'm going to start with a poem called A Poem for Actors. And this is after a John Wiener's poem, who was a gay American poet from the 1970s. The room is filled with light, our bodies heaving with air. We are present in a way no one understands the lives we flee from. Documenting impermanence is a form of strength. This palmed love is codified among the slats where we distill into performance. The lines alive, transformed in utterance from the author's burden, the audience's expectation. What this means is our translucence. The utter destruction of days, for this is what we are made for, that moment of disappearance where we are done with pretending we are not the dawn, backlighting the empty stage, the applause. Now we are your disbelief, your pause at our encroaching night. This next poem is a short poem called Withdrawn. And it's a poem about trying and failing to reach somebody. Withdrawn. He is a cliff face looming over the beach. It's sand and afterthought to its abrupt landscape. He is a wall of unscalable chalk, leaning into its erosion, unreturned calls, hearing only wind. I'll be gone soon. He longs to be silt, unsentimental when carried by the roar of a river to a sea where he's sediments, an irrelevance lining the ocean floor. This next poem, bit of a trigger warning for threat. I wrote this poem and I sent it to a few people, and they all, without fail, were like, "Are you okay?" But it felt that it needed to be documented, and it's got, as I said, threat and some language. It's called The Lads. The top deck almost imperceptibly bristles at their back row bark. A child involuntarily looks past me, sees the taller one screaming, threatening that he will gladly go to prison, that he will cut out his throat and show him his voice box. Their cunt. His laughter, a sonic boom, everyone staunch, stoic, staring at their phones. Can they see mine? Is now the time to watch Drag Race? Is again the kicker until they see, will they turn their easy, knife-like rage onto me? I am 35, confident, and yet ready to make allowances. I hit play, defiant, but notice my hand, its grip, the angle obscuring. I can't concentrate. I hear their music shrieking, their laughter, a smell of shit. I don't turn around. I have never hit anyone with intent, with a mobile phone screaming fury. He's back, bellowing his conversation, an act of dominance. What will we do without this plugged in civility, a contrite ignorance? Our bodies rely on rigidity and feigned casualness. The lads get up and saunter, pretending not to watch how their weight displaces our air, our breath. They're hawks waiting to see a pair of eyes break cover. No one looks up. It is over. The top deck, a silent hymnal full of threats. This poem is a kind of hymn to small towns. One of the themes that runs through Nightlight, particularly early on, is kind of the difference between the country and the city and the kind of moving from one to the other. This is called Local. A knot of desiccated shop fronts, A festival comprised of 4 floats, a souvenir shop spills its unsold stock out onto the street. This town is a drive-through, its residents siphoned off into veins, bled into the outdoor space to oneself. The hill could be a mountain or a little up and over, a detour of desire lines worn into the earth, the history of exploration, escape plans. To meet the horizon, one must become a cloud, a lance, a microcosm, a vista, a picture postcard to the folks without trails laid out. The locals don't walk here, they rescind their sky, allow meaning to disappear behind day trip days and eyes, and we imagine life in its confines. The splinter between the pub and the post office, home, a winter whose length you can walk without ever leaving. Speaking as we did in the introduction, this poem is dedicated to my good friend and what was he described himself, the indefatigable force behind Seven Kitchens Press, which is a never true word being spoken. This is dedicated to him, but obviously not about him. And again, trigger warning for trash. It's called A Man in Love for Ron Mowering. The wrinkles on my knuckles split their seams, coughing blood in protest at your gutter mouth. Your guttural protests seem wrinkled from your spilt body, knuckles dragging on the floor, your coccyx bruising the dirt. Your body ragged and rankled, adrenaline flutters your hackles, sick cocksuckers you raged, holding your rankled ankle wrinkled to you at right angles. My fist flutters off your dirt, my blood borders these gutters that your cough tries to dispel. Rebutted by this spell, your protest is the itch in your throat, unable to wipe the love from his eyes. I'm gonna read one more poem, and then I'm going to read a few new poems, and then I'll finish up with some more poems from this. This poem is dedicated to my mentor, Irish poet Nell Regan, who very much helped me get this book to where it is, and I'm very grateful. And this is about a very vulnerable moment, and it's called Gown. A reverse straitjacket, not designed to close. No matter how hard I try to tie the fabric strips, I'm exposed. I pull on my hoodie over hospital clothes. I sit in the corridor. My shins are cold. I worry that someone could see up what feels like a dress that barely reaches my knees. I have decorated myself for cabaret, perfected little Edie Bouvier, lip synced my way through all the best parts, a scattershot approach to drag as art. I feel unsafe as I wait for the ultrasound. I watch myself pull down the hem, zip up my hoodie, cross my thighs so no one can see what? My bare legs? My discomfort that for a moment I felt like a boy in a dress, and that for a moment I allowed myself to feel less. I'm going to read 3 newer poems now. The first 2 are from a pamphlet which I worked on for a couple of years called Masters, and it's a series of response poems, ekphrastic poems, to dead queer male painters' paintings. Don't ask me how I settled on that remit, but that's what it was. So this is after Henry Robertson Craig's painting Sunset, and I turned this lovely landscape into a poem about cruising. Sunset. The sea has called the tides in for dinner. We walk the strand, submerged throughout the day, relishing the wet sand, hugging our boots. The first dinghy we come to is occupied. Tom, from last month, supine and stargazing, watches us pass in his periphery. We find a small sailboat and settle in. For once, we seem equally excited. We watch the sunlight become indirect. You worry that the dunes are busier. I kiss you and it feels like the fun fair where we first met. The others are watching the boys we were find each other again. So this is another poem from that series, and this is after two paintings by Henry Scott Cheek, but the poem is called The Critics. The Critics after Henry Scott Cheek. The younger boy floating in the water blushes rose pink. The older boys have seen everything between his strip and dip, a fumble face first into the green-blue water, shimmering like the Mediterranean. They want to fuck him. Henry might want to fuck them all. We think, examining his paintings, naked boys sprawled everywhere. The canon of gay art is, to say the least, problematic. Are the older boys about 16 with the younger being 14, 13? I don't want to hold up something untoward, but then maybe we are making it pornographic. Perhaps the boys are just friends, but then Henry is the problem. Painting swathes of adolescent flesh, right? I turn instead to his cadet on Newport Beach near Falmouth with another boy in the sea, and here, both boys look 14. One in the water like before, the other clothed and contemplating. The cadet knows what it will take to strip in front of that bobbing head. He is aware that nothing is innocent. Not when your heart's in it like that. He strips, gets into the sea, and kisses the boy, both of them having dreamed of this for months. But that's not what we see. We see him before any decision is made, still thinking it through. He better not stay too long, Henry considers, but really, the cadet is waiting for Henry to look elsewhere before he makes his move. This is a new poem which was published on Visual Verse earlier this year. And Lidl, I'm not sure if you have Lidl over there. It's a supermarket, the European supermarket. I'm sure you do. But this is called Don Quixote in Lidl. Butter, eggs, tea, and a small tin of beans. The trolley half full, undecided, an empty aisle. He runs, jumps onto Rocinante's back, rushing through the shop, laughing, holding out his hands to feel the high grass as it falls from the shelves. The swarm of shouting knights and name tags wave their long arms, trying to block out his target. Sancho, beatific and holding court outside, berating those onlookers who doubt the old man and his nag, hooves squeaking, rattling along. Sancho eggs him on, holding up his phone, filming the inevitable crash. The crown of stars gives way to a sweet lady in green, quietly gallant, who helps him up. Failure. She takes his history as he cries in the back of the ambulance. So I'm going to go back to Nightlight again, and I'm going to read 4 more poems, and then I'm going to run away. This next poem is, I like to say it's an example of how long poetry takes. I think it had about 10 different drafts, 4 different names, all kinds of things. Years and years it took, so it eventually got there. And it's called Turkish Bath. Under the railway arches, a queer London imitation with its own elliptical rituals, a silent bartering for pre-residuals. You're one of the contactables, as Arthur once said. Our groin and ass conjoining the fiction that skin spins, our rhythms supersede this heavy gravity outside. Each touch is a spotlight, throwing the rest of the world in darkness. The steam is set dressing, burying the cold sweat of your situation. We chat about our impending dissolution into strangers' lives. You ladle water over stones and disappear in their encroaching hiss. I rinse. You shower thoroughly, a surgeon blanching his skin, a guzzle, you correct me, a ritual you couldn't possibly. You towel off, leaving me felled with no hot water. This next poem is called The Familiar, and it's a prose poem. After being single for so many goddamn years, I realized that you were the most significant relationship in my life then. All we had in common were baser urges. We rarely spoke, and mostly a call came out of nowhere after months of absence. asking if lips and skin could meet and smash against each other. Early on, half of our stomping ground was a building site. Empty shells of half-finished houses, the fourth wall missing for so long it had been presumed non-existent. Perfect place to kneel and pray. The African security guard didn't know how to respond to me spitting you out and casually saying hi, and days later was still confused as he grabbed me by the shoulder shouting, "Were you playing a game?" Smiling, I told him that of course I was, and that I'd won. Like a cruising cliche, you wouldn't kiss, but at least you could when pressed to rationalize why. Cocks don't proclaim intimacy the way that tongues do. There's a submission and kissing that you can't just wish away, apart from the odd time when the lust level became too much and you pressed me up against the posters on my wall and kissed me like our heads could conjoin. The years changed us. Your hair is thinning. I moved away once and is finally gone for good this time. Gone are your construction days and your deconstructed body, all hard chest and arms. And in its place, a paunch to match mine. Before I left, we sat on the edge of my bed, both only in boxer shorts before beginning. I smiled happy, content that we were not the awkward teenagers we met as, full of furtive tugs, but that we were here, indoors, that we were men together. I have two more poems left. One of the things about this book by design is, I don't know if anyone's ever read Belger by Sylvia Plath, but I remember the first time I read that. She seems fine until she's not, but until she's not, it's too late. And she ends up in a mental asylum. I kind of found myself emulating that in how I laid out this book, because the second half of it is about mental health. And this is one of those mental health poems, and it's called The Imaginary Friend. The imaginary friend pinches inside the center of my chest like an axial graph folded and ripped, an extra dimensional shift to shit cinched with the rented smile of a guest. He suspects that his greatest achievement is unraveling the probable, cause traveling without effect, leaving life only with the introspect, the what ifs, your standard issue reject. He perfects his wind tunnel soft whisper, appearing almost apologetic at his fissures dotted around reality, each idle thought an enemy, each slit quickening the tangled nerves around it, each brush becomes a thicket, drowning my vision and the waterline, revising life into a supine circle of salt. I just want to say thank you so much for having me back here. It's been absolutely wonderful. I'm delighted as well to be doing a different set next week at the Poetry Pride Parade. And thank you to Sandy, Kim, and Don. And I'm going to close with a poem which is dedicated to my good friend Eric Norris. And it's called 10 Steps to be Correctly Consumed by a City. Dressed like the person who plays you in the movie of your life. Allow marks in your skin, but worry they're usurping. Body parts should become agents of commotion. Act like your artisan hand-drawn stress, like it's an art form. Bury the greenery of your accent in collage. Learn to think inside the barrage of noise. Be aware every moment, each day is your choice. Your life, a gesture you can't quite hold on to, nor should you. Thank you, everybody.
That is Mark Ward, everyone. And again, so much more. There's so much more coming. Here's my thing about Mark. Like, well, again, Salmon brother. The new book is Nightlight, everyone. And obviously it's lighting up the pages. It's lighting the skies. It's sending its light everywhere. You know, I've never been to Dublin. And one of the things I'm most excited about Dublin is coming and meeting you.
I can't wait. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
I
can't wait.
hope it'll happen next year.
Yeah, I'm here. We'll have a great night. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So thank you, Mark, and we look forward to having you back next week for the Poetry Pride Parade. Thank you so much. Again,
You're very
folks, the
welcome.
book is Nightlight, and have a very good rest of your evening. There it is from Salmon Poetry.
Thank you.
Well, I just, I have the greatest job being the host of this amazing series. And oh my gosh, today the people that I get to talk about and listen to and hear their work just is really filling my heart so much. Our next reader is Risa Denenberg, and Risa has been with us for the first Poetry Pride Parade, second Poetry Pride Parade, the new book showcases, has just been such a supporter, often is in our audience listening, and as well, like, is the incredible co-founder of Headmistress Press, which was our co-sponsor for the very first annual Poetry Pride Parade. Very, very generous and donating books to the parade. And so it's one thing to be a consummate editor, a citizen, because you write book reviews for so many writers, and how you have time to write your most moving and diverse work. I will never know how you do it. And also, you've had a very full career as a very careful, thoughtful health caregiver. Again, I have so much respect, honor, and love for you as a human being. And I thank you for, I thank and I celebrate you today for your new collection. And I'm so glad that you're able to join this quartet today. Everyone, Risa Denenberg lives on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, where she works as a nurse practitioner. She is a co-founder of Headmistress Press, curator at the Poetry Cafe online, and the reviews editor at Rivermouth Review. See what I mean, everybody? That's a lot. Her most recent publications include the poetry collection Slight Faith from Moonpath Press. Again, Headmistress, Moonpath. Oh my gosh, these two of my favorite presses. The chapbook Post-Human, which is right behind me on the shelf here, which was a finalist in the Floating Bridge 2020 chapbook competition, and her newest collection, Rain Dweller, also from the amazing Moonpath Press. It brings me like all the joy in the world to welcome you back to Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. And I'm so excited that I'm going to get to hear you also read from Rain Dweller live in person in a couple weeks here in Olympia. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Don. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys and listening to everyone read. Because it is Pride Month, I am going to start with my lesbian poems, which are in this book, Whirlwind at Lesbos, and this was published by my press. Headmistress Press, the press that Miriam and I have run for, I don't know, almost 10 years. Whirlwind at Lesbos. We met in Istanbul, where your face was a veil and you beckoned a reckless gesture. Cover your eyes, you hissed, when I dared look through your robe at your breast buds. You were 12 when we first kissed, wadded your gum under the desk, whistled at me, spit into the wind, earnestly began chewing my hair. We ran away to Naples during the long war while flames licked our feet and charred our skin. Hurry, you barked over your shoulder. I was already losing sight. I wailed all night in Jerusalem when you turned me hard against the stone wall, pressing against my back as you reached up inside me, grabbed my womb with your fist. In winter, we rented a small cottage in Copenhagen. Where winds blew snow over our bed, we embraced and couldn't let go. You were cold and needed comfort. We undressed each other, maidens in the 5th century, and were discovered naked, entwined, asleep, your ringlets black and soft on the silken pillow. But then I missed the cab to the airport, slept right through the alarm one morning in Cairo, and you were gone. I was beheaded with your name on my lips. The baggage was clearly marked, but reached Paris by error. I'm in New York, awaiting your email. And this one's more fun. But that's my lesbian poem. This one is really a fun poem, I think. It's called For Girls Who Fuck Like Sisters. They were it. Girl fuck buddies, best friends who could fuck each other and anyone else they pleased. Never treading on jealousy, living together effortlessly, without heat, without rancor. Roommates in college, with boyfriends on the side who snuggle up together, share shameful secrets, anticipate 20 or 30 years of reunions where they would laugh hard at their girl exploits, enjoy the image they projected. Best friends only want what's best for each other, are prepared for friendship to terminate when significant others arrive to take over, never feel bruised when it occurs, in fact, are thrilled, ready to be a bridesmaid at a moment's notice, always know just what to wear, are never caught naked, can accept reality, and at the reception's end, a kiss to the cheek is most acceptable. And darling, shall we make a date 1 year from now, pour scotch over rocks, and catch up on old times? So that was fun. I'm going to read from Rain Dweller. And I'm just so pleased to have this book published by Moonpath Press, along with all the other Pacific Northwest poets that I've come to love and to almost, after 12 years or more, I'm not sure, sort of have been able to think of myself now as a Pacific Northwest poet. Well, actually, I'm going to read first a poem that's not in there because I think I have to read it, and then I'll go into those poems. This is Yellow Star. In my case, the yellow star will be made of 2 perfect pink triangles cut from cheap dry goods at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where the women sew stars on at the ready, hunched over singers, and not wasting time on stairs, work right up to closing time, then jump. They didn't want to die so young, and neither did the gay boys who died in droves at the close of the last century. I would be one who would beg you to shoot me, who would know that borders lie, that I could not endure the march through the woods and the snow to the trains at the end. We who say never forget also know that it could happen again to us, and we do not know more now than we did then how to make it stop. The stitching never ends. For practice, I have sutured my arm to my sleeve with triangles made from pages torn from the book of Job. I should have introduced this for people who may or may not know. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory went up in a fiery blaze. It was in 1911 in Greenwich Village, New York, and the doors were locked. And I've worked in a factory where the doors were locked, so I know what that feels like. 26 women jumped to their deaths, and these were mostly young Jewish and Italian immigrants. So these are poems from the new book. The first poem I'm going to read is for a patient. And she was a patient I had for a long time and loved very well. Crushed Fruit for Mary A. 1. Another patient died today. I know the scent, a scent I know well, but not at all, crumpled into a promise made 5 years ago when it was time to retire, to go on at least until she died, never planning beyond this moment. I can't describe this feeling, the way clouds claim nothing as they darken into rain. I waited expectantly, impatient at times for suffering to end, but hers or mine? Does it comfort the family to say now the heavy lifting is over? How her longing for heaven softened that bed. 2. Tears surprised me today. I've held back so much for so long. I'm scored along the edge, chest ripe for rending. Yet haven't I walked this path before, strewn with the cloying scent of Easter lilies, my own left behind longings, my litany of corpses. Dare I count them? Oh, death, you are not a river, but I have careened your banks my whole career. Studying your silences, submitting to your elegies. Another Mary plants her son at my feet so I will know how deep pain can run. But who can know the sorrows of another? I choke over words, feel the soft stir of her in the air. And isn't this fragrance her must? The crushed fruit of her? Oh, death, walking past you, so often I look the other way, ask the buried to forgive the inelegant clatter of my steps, beg sunflowers in the field to hide their yellow faces. I have my stash of powder, the knowledge, also patience. Finding something to live for is my talent, my small raft. Enough beauty in this world. I want to say that Rain Dweller is a prayer and a blessing to the earth. That's the spirit in which I wrote the poems in it. And a lot of them are about trees and some about the earth and some dystopian about the earth without us. This is enough beauty in this world. Someone on Twitter asks us to recall this beautiful place we'd ever seen. I said Earth, because I've never been to another planet. I'm exhausted and dirty and abandoned, and I still said Earth. Floating at the helm of my lonely seabed, I survey the damage, the centuries of neglect, and whisper, Earth. Married to sheepskin, to the elk herd, to Sundays with only the radio for company, I vow to love my only mother. I've been handed memories, small and large. I've wandered many places, and each one stunning. Miami, Kabul, Dubrovnik, Seattle. I've traveled by plane, by ferry, on the jet stream. I've trekked barefoot in ballet flats. I've walked for days in the desert with only a blanket for water. All of this just to remind myself I live here. And still, I say Earth. Here's one of the namesake poems. Rain Dweller learns the names of trees. I've learned to tell the fir from the yew, the silver from the red cedar. At sunrise, there is a thin glint of light northeastward where I await Mount Baker's frozen specter careening over Discovery Bay. The lamps of Port Townsend blink. Strands of fog hang over fields, peckish deer nibble dandelions. I spare my lawn for their graze. The squirrels, miniature and rust-bellied, easily reach the hanging birdseed. I don't try to learn bird calls. They come to feed, and that's enough. There are rumors of big cats. I've seen 2 elk. One stared right through me as if she knew my secrets, the other roadkill. You once told me my poems are too grim. I should try my hand at something more pastoral. I've seen powdered snow on cedars. I've grown passably fond of rain. Every day the clouds amaze. This poem is Selfie at Deception Pass. And if you aren't from here, if you're from around here, you've seen the bridge at Deception Pass. It's an amazing, magnificent bridge. And it separates Whidbey from Fidalgo Island. It's sort of from here to the mainland. That's one way to go. And it's an amazing bridge, and many people have jumped off this bridge. I don't think they can now, but they have. Selfie at Deception Pass. You can't say you didn't know you would drown here. There was no deception. The application clearly stated rain dwellers only. You didn't come here planning to jump. You're not a planner. The bridge soars 180 feet above the narrows. Click. Clutching at the safety mesh, buffeted by crosswinds, waters churning below, you pray an enormous cormorant will sweep down to bear you away. You only came here to flee the voices, to unwind amid the tall, reedy grasses that grow along ponds and stitch these brackish waterways. The regret that rises in your throat during the descent was predictable. Instead of flight, perhaps you should have rode. The hell that flung you here debarked with you. Like you, they are only obeying instinct, seeking Arctic shrubs. These geese flying north in winter. I had to write this poem when I found out that sometimes geese fly north in winter. And I'm not sure I remember exactly why or when they do that, but sometimes geese fly north in winter. This is Cul-de-sac, and it's based on a true story with a lot of adjustments of the details. Cul-de-sac. 1. The doe slept on my dawn. I'm sorry, let's start that again. The doe slept on my lawn again this morning, having shooed her spotted twins to glean their own pastures. I studied my unshorn yard, my habitat, the dewy grass, having shooed my own featherless from the nest long ago. Seemed a quiet morning, fog rolling in across the bay, tomato plants showing off their yellow buds, sunny sides for breakfast, chickens cackling in their pen, my toast dry, my coffee black. Someday I will mow this rowdy yard, coax my neighbors to speak to me again. Change rustles the page for a moment, a blustery warning. I stopped by to check on him, my usual, bearing eggs, the one I call Uncle on this friendless cul-de-sac. 2. By the time they carried his body to the curb with flashing lights, neighbors had begun to gather in the street, shoeless, tank tops, bathrobes. A dog licked my shin. A girl I'd never seen rambled on about how he owed her something. I gave my name to the cop. I told the story start to finish. I checked for pulse, for breaths, my lips on his. I counted 1, 2, 3, all the way to 30. They turned off the flashers, pulled the sheet. And the last poem I'm going to read is called Still Life with Moving Parts. And I think of this as a perfect poem, not compared to anybody else's poetry, but in my poetry, this is the kind of poem I always wanted to write. It was published recently in Brackets, a place where it really belonged. And it has a couple of words I'm just going to go over just because I had to learn that the riddle, the Buddhist riddle, is not pronounced koans, it's pronounced koans. And the other word is diastole, which is one of the medical names for one of the beats of the heart. Systole, diastole, systole, diastole. That's what that word means. Still life with moving parts. I collect koans. The human body made of seawater. The sea made of salt water. How salt can deaden a lake or rim a glass. How turning back turned a woman into salt. The shoreline where tides shift the sand. How glass is made of sand. The tidewaters that wave in syncopated rhythms. The silence between breakers. The heart that all its life only rests between beats. The moments in between when there is doubt. How I fall and rise to fall and rise again. The diastole of my heart and of the sea. Thank you.
Everyone, that is the undeniable Risa Denenberg. Absolutely. Absolutely astounding set of poetry every single time you come onto the program. I am just swept away. I am just absolutely swept away. You know, I can hear poem after poem after poem. And it is always a journey, and it is always powerful, and it is always from the heart. It is always from the heart. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to acknowledge also in the room today is also one of your co-conspirators, Mary Miriam, Headmistress Press. I can't say enough about Headmistress Press. Like, what an incredible contribution to our LGBT diaspora, really, and also I want to give a shout out to Lana Heckman Ayers, Moonpath Press. Incredible. If you want to read the best work coming out of the Pacific Northwest, Moonpath Press is your guiding light. Thank you so much, Risa, and I look forward to seeing you in Olympia soon. I never want this reading to end today. I just don't want it to end. And sadly, well, not sadly, because our next reader, oh my gosh, yes. But again, if the reading could go on forever, I would be all too happy. But if it has to end, I'm glad we're closing today with David Groff. I had what felt for me, one of like the most profound experiences of my literary life when I attended AWP, the Associated Writing Programs Conference in Washington, D.C. And I saw David and his co-panelists read the poetry and talk about the poets that they had worked with who had died from AIDS and what their legacy were. I'm getting chills just talking about it, and it was a number of years ago. I'm getting a lot of chills today, obviously, folks. I have never ever forgotten that panel at AWP. Is probably, I've been to so many. That is number one. And everything else, even the best of the panels, are so far below that panel. David is an incredible teacher and literary citizen. And I know this firsthand because one of my students at Evergreen was also his student when she went to graduate school. And she always told me how generous, gracious, brilliant David is. And I feel so fortunate to have been able to interact with David over the years through Cultivating Voices and the contributions that he has made to the program. Specifically, I want to make a shout out for when he really provided the historical underpinnings to a reading that we did on National Coming Out Day a few years ago. So it is always with the utmost respect and pride when I am able to introduce a person that I have so much respect for and whose poetry I truly, truly just adore, and it moves me deeply. David Groff's new book is Live in Suspense. And what I love about the title is, of course, it could be Live in Suspense or Live in Suspense. Right here, folks, right behind me, I was able to get it at AWP. David's book is from Trio House Press, another press that we truly adore here on Cultivating Voices. His previous book, Clay, also was published by Trio House and was chosen by Michael Waters for the Louise Bogan Award. His first collection, Theory of Devolution, was selected by Mark Doty for the National Poetry Series. He is the co-editor of Persistent Voices, Poetry by Writers Lost to AIDS, and Who's Your Daddy? Gay writers celebrate their mentors and forerunners. An independent book editor, he teaches poetry and publishing in the MFA Creative Writing Program at the City College of New York. Would you please join me in welcoming David Groff?
Wow, Sandy, thank you so much. I feel I can die now. You know, that was just that was pretty great. Thank you so much for that introduction and for all you do and your group do with Cultivating Voices, and my thanks to the amazing poets we've heard today, Karen, Mark, and Risa. I've read with Risa before in Brooklyn, and I'm happy to hear the new work new to me of Mark and Kim. So that's really terrific. I'm glad to be here so much. I'll be reading today from Live in Suspense, which has this kind of tippy cover to it that I hope makes you slightly anxious as you look at it. It's by sculpture by the sculptor Michael Broman. And the book is about, I think, living in this kind of liminal state of waiting for something else to happen in our lives that I think so many of us have at certain points in our lives, and maybe today too, waiting in some ways for the next mortal thing to happen. And that's, I think, what holds these poems together, that range over elegies for parents, discussion again, as I've done a lot with AIDS and HIV, with long-term relationships, and with kind of the larger questions of how we keep on living. I'm going to read a few poems from the book today, including the title poem, which is the first poem in the book, Live in Suspense. I leave Clay, but just for a weekend business, Los Angeles, so the risk is minimal. Still, each parting is practice. It's a little death, what done and the others called orgasm, that intense suspension, a squeezing out the metaphysicals said we didn't remake, not a river, but a draining lake. I embrace this shrug of separation, the unbrushed goodbye at 6 a.m., the plunge in the stomach as the elevator plunges downward, as the plane will not plunge, probably, nor will the lift crash on La Cienega or the boulevard fall into fissures, nor will Clay's bike collide with a truck on Route 9, plunging him down a palisade. Every risk is a rehearsal. We know what chance does. We know what death does, will do, has to do. Our bridges still hold us, though their cables quiver, which is why when I kiss clay, I recall how HIV, unchecked, made our everyday a next to last, urgent as orgasm, until it was tamed as truth and metaphor. Which is why when I kiss clay, I taste the dust of his tongue. Re-erected with desire, we are metaphysical, the little death, a resonance away. Leaving him, I return to him. This next poem is a little longer. It takes place on a lake smack dab in the middle of Maine, that in an area known for slate mining. And unnecessary detail to know the slate from this area around Lake Hebron was used all over for our sidewalks and is used for the gravestones of John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy, who do not figure directly in this poem. It's called Disbelieving These Deaths, I Go to Sit by Lake Hebron. A thunderstorm has spun from a near blue sky, then faded like a tantrum, the child sunny and unharmed. Warmth like a human's breath shrugs off the fall wind. The lake is only mildly disturbed. It didn't know the deceased, so its sympathies don't extend to empathy, and it's a lake, not a pathetic fallacy, though I try. I work to stay here, not to be netted to various keenings. Hard to do, even on a good day. In the shallows are the slabs of slate like coffins fallen off a truck, each one not containing a body I knew, of those slate caskets, irretrievable in water, speak to me. They inform me that if I were really here, I'd notice the cloud very like a whale until it blossoms like a poppy, fast. A chorus of dead from a chorus of caskets ought to open their lids and shoulder out their slabs to walk on water. My dead father would eye the lake for plops of fish he could catch and feel guilty for eating eye to eye, though he was dubious of lakes, preferring currents, local water strung to seas, which lets me see him as a river, bodies of water as bodies, as metaphors, including the Babylon waters of weeping. My mother, city-born, should stride to me across the tidelessness, the wind revealing her girlish nape. And George, my most recent dead guy, cleared of the thunder behind his brow, and now rise right here, part of the democracy of day, along with Daniel Chrisman, 25, dead on 9/11, 18 years ago today, a man I know from a poster gladly diving at 43 into this crisp water, warmer than dying young. All my loves with AIDS, the guys who I drag everywhere, Ron, Len, Craig, Jay, Paul, Mark, John, Tom, Richard, the armada ghosting the cove, their wakes cut short, should land on the island I am. Hebron, the first city, arid, blazes from across the ocean, its millennia of murders, histories bleeding into each other, torches and missiles and rifles like lake lightning. Children killed in cars or cages, they should splash. All of these once knew the word for lake, said lake, swam in a lake of genuine water, fell through the frosty metaphor of lake, their lips too blue and sown ever to say lake again. Here they are, none of them at all, evaporated out of time until I become a lake nobody swims in. Again, the trees tremble, the clouds lower their cliche of brow, the water snaps like a shroud. It is a day in September, more thunder to come. The lake is alive with togue, perch, and bass. This next poem is a shorter one, but I think actually kind of a queer one. And I happen to know there's someone in the audience who likes my poems about bugs. And this book somehow became full of bugs. And here's one of them. called Desert Stink Beetle. You who gave your wings for more water, evolving to adhere them to your thorax until you became a shiny black capsule, a desert death reaper, a hearse of a bug, nosing the dirt as if you hunt your glasses, your butt in the sky like a high rider, comically sober, soberly comic, your exhaust, your line of defense, the 20-inch ray of spray you emit to get the last word, a stink you survive that lets you survive. My darkling, my thick drop of unmoored night, let me persist as your species, submit my wings to my torso, commit myself to ground, make my diet detritus and shit, evolve to be unlovely, a black ruby of gloom, a fecal American scarab, behind my earth-ridden face, my breath all bad, my ass in the air, my moon, ready to let it out, ready to take it in. There are a number of poems in this book that have little similar titles. There are a bunch called Days of, which are poems after Cavafy and his nostalgia poems, which I want to revise. And there are a number that begin with A Boy's Own, kind of classical term for Victorian books on how boys should be or how boys should think. And here's one of those poems. A Boy's Own Jesus. The older brother I never had, the one who knew the way to the bathroom in the dark. Okay with rushed prayers. He who witnessed the fists gut me to breathlessness, able to sleep during storms, trustworthy though with erratic tempests, like a father after a few drinks. Never a father, keeping distance from his own hard father, suffering little children who suffered, yet suffering when I lay my weight on him and made his thighs tingle, shaking his head at my penis, pronging this pollution, this boy distraction. Looking good in a loincloth, his pained muscles turning me truant. Desire and dying made one body. In my fevers rising with rope wings over my wild boat, feeling fevered too, keen to each degree, making me his special boy. His arms held and wrestled me, a cradle or a cage, devil or deliverer. Here's another poem that was kind of a surprise for me as I read it and then worked on it. The title also kind of is in the first line of the poem, so you'll hear that. Where is the lady? Where is the lady I was when I was 4? A stole of blanket around my neck, a purse of a pail exquisite on my wrist, my heels held high, toes sallied forward on stilettos of air. I, the loveliest mother's lovely friend, caught up in my designs, so dizzy with my perfume I had to swan my cloud wherever it was I walked, no matter it was who looked, their distaste a hazy buzz, almost undeterred, almost, by my father's regular scowl as he waved his flat palm down, a flash of signal that said to drop my feet to the floor of malehood that we shared. I, the child he wished would shed the girl like a dress, weight the pail with sand, run with the lift of keds, and keep an eye on the ball. The being my mother assured my father was a phase for this Dr. Spock of a kid, but also the puzzling son whose picture my father took, developed, and showed, whose photos are why I see the vision of who I was, the runaway fairy of child when ladyship swelled in me like a bodice or a bloodstream, until the purse no longer appealed, or the heels hurt too much to bear, or children began their games and shame was the weightiest mink. And I shrugged on the boy, incited to put aside the childish things of girls, boyishness his resort, who tethered himself to men, who loved not trucks but cars, not for their engines but for the lushness of their lines, for the sleekness in their speed, who came to love his gun, who drove away whoever she was he might have been, not knowing who I could be then or could be now, this man who daily wears a suit that seems to fit his frame, his loafers almost light, who can almost locate the scent of the girl he's sent to her room, dressing for her party, craving an invitation. I'll read one more poem. The poems in this book take place in a lot of different landscapes, a lot on the East Coast and the Chesapeake Bay and other areas in the Southwest that kind of have that are very much part of my imagination. And yet there are a lot that take place in New York City as well. And here's one of those. Let me just find it here. I'm just reading from the screen, so. It's called I with No Rights in This Matter, which is a penultimate line from a poem by Theodore Roethke called Elegy for Jane. I with no rights in this matter. All day I have been looking for my children who I know will never exist. I do not find them in the forms of my students, though I would pluck them out of traffic as if my genes were speaking. Nor are my children my nieces and nephews whose blood bears resemblances to my own, in whom I echo. They have parents to belong to, and I borrow them. Tangled amid the toddlers and strollers, the elementary kids skipping beside their dads to school, the 10-year-olds walking boldly alone past the chanting man in the compost bin, the sullen or screeching teens, all angry angles, their parents, practiced men and women who once as babies might have sat on my lap and now run enterprises. I am where among them? My non-procreation seemed the condition of my freedom. I who swept from man to man, who lived like a boy, who felt like no one's father, not even his own, who in the prime of his sperm suspected his semen was deadly, who saw men of a generation give birth to death, his ejaculations dead ends, ciphers of surges and love, who can't run fast enough to catch the fading train. Still, I feel in the fork of my genes those millions I produce even now, however warped and bent, clamoring to make half the child I will not make, striving inside me as I try to bear the mostly straight world's stranger children, offspring owned by no one, really, amazing in their incipient decay, stray as leaves and already scattering, running to the risk of the intersection. All of them, my letters to God on the street. I let them go ahead of me. Thanks very much.
David, I'm just trying to gather myself, quite honestly. And I think many people in the room know what I'm talking
Oh, well, thank you.
about.
Thanks so much.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks for having me today.
Oh, it is always an honor, a privilege, and I have your book. I treasure it, and I treasure that I got to see you and have
Yes.
you sign it at AWP, and I look forward to seeing you in New York soon.
Yes. Yeah, I would love that. And thank you all. Thank you all for listening and for being here today, and to my fellow poets as well, whose work I'm eager to read.
Everyone, that is David Groff, and the new book is Live, Live,
Thank you.
Suspense
Hmm.
from Trio House Press. It was full of suspense
Thank
and
you.
history, and well, my breath is just taken away. My words are gone. Let me just say there's so much more
Thank you.
that we heard and you have yet to hear if you get the book. So please do, folks, if you have the resources, please buy 1, 2, 3, 4, all of the books today that you've heard here on Cultivating Voices. I want to thank profoundly, deeply, movingly, in my mind, and Kim Ports Parsons knows this, I had built up this reading through the stratosphere in my mind. And it crashed right through that ceiling today. Everyone, would you please unmute and thank appropriately our 4 readers for today: Karen Poppy, Mark Ward, Risa Denenberg, and David Groff. What a reading.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. thank you.
Bravissimo, bravissimo.
Bravissimo.
Amazing.
You know, I kind of envy those folks who are going to be, just going to Cultivating Voices, and, they watch it every week on the recording, and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to sit down. They have no idea what they are. Oh my gosh. Get ready, everybody. It's going to be a bumpy, amazing ride when you are watching this video. Well, all my friends, you have been here witnessing and experiencing a reading for the ages here, a new book showcase for the ages, and on Cultivating Voices live poetry. I think it's our first ever special Pride edition new book showcase, and I feel we probably should do this again next year, this exact same way, and introduce you to the new books of our members in the LGBTQ plus community. It is a fabulous forerunner, a foreshadowing, an overture, shall I say, to next week's Poetry Pride Parade. Oh, my friends, come on back. What I love about the parade and our features is that we try to showcase a range of folks in our features, kind of up and coming poets and those who are well established, those who have influenced younger poets, our legacy poets, and those folks who are doing great work in their literary communities, along with, and this is the parade part, right? We've got our features, and then we've got all of you. Well, we probably can't have every single one of you that would like to read. Thank you, Kim. I knew I need to hold myself back because I would let everybody read. But the part that makes it the parade is that we intersperse our features with our open mic readers. So you all also become the features and part of the Poetry Pride Parade. 1 poem apiece, up to 3 minutes. If you read a little less, you're making a little space for somebody else. It's awesome. Wear your regalia, dress up, bring your pride with you to the Poetry Pride Parade. Next week, our features will be from Olympia, Fern Rausch. Gustavo Hernandez will be with us. Love Gustavo. Lene Reed with her new book, Awanti. Mark Ward's returning from Dublin for the parade. Wouldn't miss it. And we have none other than another astounding literary citizen. It's been bringing us poetry online all throughout the pandemic. Wednesday night poetry zone, Kai Kagan. I know you'll want to be here and hopefully participate in the parade. Same time as usual, 12 Pacific. That is, I'm not going to do all the time zones. I'll just do 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern, 8 p.m. If you are over across the pond in England, Ireland, and wherever you're joining us from in the world, join us from your time zone for our 4th annual Poetry Pride Parade. Thank you once again to Karen, Mark, Risa, and David. David was like, oh, I can die now. I was like, yeah, I kind of can die now too, except I have to come back and host the program next week. Yes, I feel so full of poetry. It's amazing. And it is what poetry provides to all of us. I mean, I think this is why we come to poetry. It makes us more alive. It brings us to our senses. It allows us to share our senses with others. I hope you all have a great week. I hope you have a great week, that you recover from this reading, and that you return next week for another reading you will need to recover from. Again, thank you so much to Kim Ports-Parsons, Don Krieger. The reading would not exist without the two of you, masters and geniuses and magicians. And I look forward, as I always do, to seeing you next week. I want to just also say thank you so much to folks who've been sending such good wishes to my mom. She wasn't able to join us today. She is still resting, but maybe she'll make it for the parade. She loves a good parade. What better parade than the Poetry Pride Parade? Well, I'm Sandy Yannone for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I look forward to seeing you all next week. As I remind you each week, please take good care of yourselves. Take exquisite care of your beloveds. And with all the pride in the world, keep writing. I'll see you next week.
All the best, Sandy, everybody. Are you all right? Take care, everyone.
Thank you.